name's Grady Wilson. I grew up here in Nevada County. I grew up in Grass Valley in the 60s, and then Nevada Union High School, and then Sierra College. Been here my whole life, and the whole time growing up when I was a young kid in the 60s, I was well aware of the gold mining, but I was always wondering how come with all these mines around here, how come nobody's actually mining? And I was under the impression that they'd mined it all out and there was none left. But then whenever you talk to an old timer, they always said, no, that's not the case. There's still plenty left. The only thing is that stopping people from going after it was the cost of getting the water out of the mine was too high. That's what was holding everybody back in the 60s. That's why people weren't mining, because they didn't have that kind of money to dewater a mine of that size. I got the opportunity eventually to go to work for the Idaho Maryland mine. I worked in the geology department, and we drilled some core holes. We drilled 38 core holes doing exploration work, trying to identify these targets that the old timers had already identified, and we were just trying to prove that they were actually still there. So we hit some of those targets and got some good results. Most of the good stuff is still down deep. I worked in the geology department, and I looked at the historic maps. I worked in the map department, and my job was to digitize these historic maps and put them in a computer model. So I actually looked at every historic map that they still have in their collection. And I looked at these with a binocular jeweler's loupe, because there was so much information and it was written so small. And I read every little note, I read every assay, I read every stope, every raise, every level, everything in that mine. I traced those maps and entered them into a computer and finally came up with a computerized model. So I know what's down there, and I know that they talk about vested rights, and the years they're focusing on are 54. Was there any kind of mining activity after 1954? Well, I looked at these maps, and when these geologists and the engineers would make notes on those maps, they'd put a date on it. So I know that they were still focusing on keeping this mine active. There wasn't really a lot of mining going on after World War II, because the cost of bringing it to the surface was so high that they could only barely break even. So they spent like 10 years doing exploration work, and I saw that on the maps and the core holes that they were developing this new technology, core holes, drilling long core holes, and they were identifying veins that they didn't even know were there. So they were discovering veins, and they were also deepening the shaft, and this was in the 50s. And the dates are on those maps. They wrote, every time they wrote a note, they put the date on there. So they weren't planning on closing the mine. They were planning on continuing operation. I don't really know exactly why they closed the mine in '57, but that wasn't part of the plan. I guess they couldn't afford to keep going. They saved all the maps. They put everything on hold, and it probably was they were planning like a year, maybe a year or two. We'll just sit on this for a year or two and then try to reopen. So for whatever reason, it never happened. But that wasn't because that wasn't part of the plan. When they were deepening the shaft and they were doing exploration drifts and drilling holes and looking for deposits and looking for high-grade deposits and new veins, that wasn't because they were planning on abandoning the project. They were planning on moving forward. And I believe it's taken longer than what they hoped, but there's still an opportunity to reopen that mine, and there's still an opportunity to follow that same plan. The minerals are still there. Nevada County is a wonderful opportunity. The deposit's there, and it's a shame to not take advantage of it. It's a shame to have a deposit like that underneath the ground, that built this community. I'd say give them a shot, The worst that could happen would be like, well, we thought we could reopen this mine. We thought we could put it into production, but we were wrong. It'll go back to the way it is right now. Or you could give them a chance and see if they can do what they say they can do. I believe RISE can do what they say they can do, and I believe they can do it in an environmentally friendly manner. This industry is very heavily regulated. They're not going to allow somebody to come in and pollute the creek. They're not going to allow somebody to come in and pollute the air. I say give them a chance. let them do what they say they can do. The water in this particular deposit doesn't have a lot of lead in it, doesn't have a lot of arsenic in it. It's clean water. You could drink it. We sampled the water when I was working there. We sampled from the surface down to 4,000 feet, 4,200 feet. And at every level, we took a sample, and that water was drinking water quality. And they're still planning on putting in a water treatment plant for water that is already clean. So that shows that they're going to be environmentally friendly. Thanks for letting me share.